Good morning, dear students. Today in the studio, myself Rakesh Patel from RG Science College and Professor Piyush Bhai M. Pandya from Gujarat Arts and Science College are here to discuss about gene transfer in bacteria. તો મિત્રો સૌથી પહેલા આપણે જોઈએ કે what is gene. Basically, gene is a sequence of DNA which has certain coding sequences and which is specifying for a particular polypeptide. The definition of gene has changed over a period of time, but this is a general definition which will be easy for you to understand that what is a gene. So in a chromosome there are several genes and the number may range from few hundreds to thousands. So basically genes are nothing else but they are the sequence of nucleotides, and this sequence of nucleotides they code for either a polypeptide or in few cases even RNAs. Now when we are talking about a gene transfer in bacteria, let us have an overview of bacterial chromosome. In most of the bacteria, the chromosome, that is the DNA, as you know that bacteria is a prokaryote and it will not have a nuclear membrane. The DNA is spread over the entire cell and it is usually double-stranded molecules of DNA which is in a circular form. The length of this DNA is around 1000 micrometer, that is around, if you stretch it out then it will be around 1 mm as a whole, but it is in a coiled form and therefore it can easily be accommodated in a cell. And this DNA has approximately 4000 to 10,000 kilobase pairs of nucleotides which subsequently code for 3000 or near about those genes, approximately 3000 genes. The figure which is given here in the slide, that is 4000 kbps and 3000 genes, is specifically with reference to E. coli. Now if you compare this with that of a human chromosome, then human beings have 23 pairs of chromosomes and the total number of base pairs is around 3 billions, that is 3 into 10 raised to 9 base pairs, and it codes for around 25,000 genes. This data is known over the last few years very exactly because of the Human Genome Project. Now when you have seen about what is a gene and what is the bacterial chromosome, then let us see how does it differ from the higher forms of life. There are so many differences, but the most important one at the molecular level is that in prokaryotes there are certain sequences which are introns. There does not exist any exons. There are exons, but they are non-coding sequences which we call them as introns. They do not exist in bacterial chromosomes. However, in higher forms of life, the non-coding sequences, which is called as a introns, is there in plenty, while the coded sequences are known as exons. Finally, when the transcription occurs, then from mRNA the introns are cut off, they are excised before the final print of an RNA is being translated by ribosomal proteins. So this is the basic difference between the bacterial genome and other eukaryotic genomes. Now let us come to the topic itself, that is the transfer of genetic material among bacteria. That is the gene transfer, what we call it as. Basically, before we go into the different mechanisms of gene transfer, I would like to say that this gene transfer can be discussed from two viewpoints. One is a vertical transfer or a linear transfer, and the other one is a horizontal transfer. We are going to discuss more about the horizontal gene transfer rather than a vertical transfer, because vertical transfer is a must. It is a process which occurs during the replication of the cells. That is, when a cell replicates, the DNA copies are made which are then distributed to the progeny cells. This happens in all cells, all microorganisms, and that is known as a vertical gene transfer or a linear gene transfer. However, the horizontal gene transfer is unique in a sense in many ways. These three processes, transformation, conjugation and transduction, these are the different mechanisms by which the gene transfer occurs. The figure on the right hand side is that of two cells which are undergoing a process of conjugation, which will be discussed in detail at a later stage. The first unique feature about the gene transfer is its unidirectional nature. That is, the transfer is from donor to recipient. It is not two-way transfer. That is, the cells, one is a donor and the other one is a recipient, where the donor always gives the DNA, or the DNA is transferred from donor to recipient. The second one, the donor does not give an entire chromosome. Because of several reasons, the process is not being completed, in a sense that the process gets disturbed, or the DNA fragments are a part of the bacterial chromosome which are being transferred. Entire chromosome is rarely, it is a very rare incidence that the entire chromosomes can be transferred, and therefore it is a small part of the donor DNA which is being transferred to the recipient cell, as a result of which merozygotes are formed. Merozygotes means partial diploid cells are formed, partially diploid cells. The third unique feature is that this gene transfer can occur within the species as well as between the species. There have been several examples where these kinds of transfers have occurred between the species too. Now let us come to the first process of gene transfer, that is the process of transformation. Now what is basically the transformation? Transformation is uptake of extracellular DNA, that is the naked DNA, from the environment into the recipient cell. How this transfer occurs, that we will discuss later on, but to begin, this process was discovered by a scientist, Frederick Griffith, in 1928, long back. He performed an experiment in which he injected the live non-capsulated, that is the rough strains of Streptococcus pneumoniae, with heat-killed, that is dead, capsulated, that is the smooth Streptococcus pneumoniae. The diagrammatic representation has been shown here. There are 4 columns, and the experiment which was performed was with mice and the organism Streptococcus pneumoniae. This organism causes pneumonia in mice, where in the first column it is shown that when a rough strain which is non-virulent, when it is injected into the mice is alive. In the second column, where the smooth, that is the virulent strain, smooth means it has got a capsule on it. When it is injected into the mice dies. The reason is very simple, as we know now, that the smooth strains, they avoid phagocytosis, while the rough strains, they are being phagocytized by the host immune system. And therefore, the smooth strains are able to kill the mice. In the third column, when the heat-killed smooth strain, heat kill means when the dead smooth strains were injected into mice, the mice lived. While according to these combinations of these three columns, when we see the fourth column, when the Griffith mixed these two strains, that is the rough strain which was alive and the heat-killed smooth strain that was dead. So the result theoretically should be that mice should be alive. But he observed that the mice died. Instead of that, mice died. He was very puzzled at this outcome, and he deduced, or he concluded, that something from the heat-killed smooth strain passed out or was taken up by the rough strains, that is alive rough strains, and that rough strains transformed itself into the virulent strain. As a result, the mice died. Now that's something which was transferred from the heat-killed rough strains. He named it as a transforming principle. This experiment was also one of the first experiments which proved that that transforming principle was nothing else but a DNA, which was concluded at a later stages. So with these experiments of Griffith, the process of transformation was discovered. Later on, this process of transformation or the transforming principle was found to be DNA in nature, and the three scientists worked on it. Avery, MacLeod and McCarty in 1944 identified this transforming principle as a DNA by performing certain in vitro experiments where the DNA or the transforming principle was being digested by nucleases, that is DNases, and therefore it was concluded that this transforming principle was nothing else but it was DNA. So the DNA had some virulence factors which was transferred from rough strains to the smooth strains, which were smooth killed cells to the rough live cells, and as a result the rough live cells, they got transformed into virulent cells. So this was how the process of transformation was discovered. Now let us discuss certain more things about transformation. Whenever the transformation occurs, as we have seen in the Griffith's experiment, a new recombinant phenotype appears. This is because the genes from one cell are transferred into the another, and there they undergo a crossover. As a result, the gene is incorporated into the host cells, that is the recipient cells, and recipient cell will form a new phenotype. Now, bacteria, they have a different ability to take up this DNA from the environment. What is important about transformation is that transformation occurs, that is in the sense that the new genotype appears. The phenotype may or may not appear, but at least a new genotype will always be there. Examples are such as Bacillus subtilis, that takes up the DNA naturally from the environment. While in laboratory, we can engineer or we can perform experiments in which certain strains under in vitro conditions can take up the donor from the environment, from the recipient. Now when we say in the environment, it means either in vitro environment or in vivo environment. How these DNA fragments, they come into the environment? Normally in vitro or in vivo, whenever a cell lyses, many times it may be due to external lysis or it may be due to a natural lysis, that is autolysis, the cell will burst or cell will lyse and the contents of the cell will spill out into the environment, and one of the content is the DNA itself. So the DNA in this way comes out into the environment, and it may happen many times that this DNA from the environment, now that DNA is a naked DNA because it is not there in the cell, is taken up by another cell, usually of the same species. Now, what are the steps of transformation? The steps includes the uptake of DNA followed by a recombination. This recombination is a legitimate, homologous or general recombination in which several genes like REC-A, REC-B and REC-C genes are involved. As you can see this in diagram, that a small red, it is shown in a red color, a small piece has been taken up by the cell, then these DNA, they undergo crossing over, and later on that piece becomes a part of the host chromosome. This is a diagrammatic representation wherein a recipient cell takes up the naked DNA from the environment into the host cells, and that piece which is being taken up enters into the cell in a single stranded form where it undergoes a recombination, and later on both the cells, when they multiply, they will pass on the new DNA, that is the DNA which is now incorporated into the host cell, into the progeny cells. Now this figure outlines the process of transformation in detail. What actually happens is that cells, they secrete certain proteins which we now call it as a, which are known as a competence factor, and these competence factors, they are adsorbed at certain sites, certain locations on the cells, and on those locations when they are absorbed, they also send certain signals to the host chromosomes by which the chromosome synthesizes certain enzymes which opens up the, or which makes a pore in the cell, as well as degrades the double-stranded DNA into single-stranded DNA. That is how it helps the transfer or taking up of the DNA from the environment into the cell, and later on a recombination takes place, and that foreign DNA or the external DNA becomes a part of the host chromosome. So this is a diagrammatic representation where you can see the process of transformation. Now what is basically a competence factor? It has been found that this competence factor is nothing else but it is a kind of a protein which is secreted by certain cells only in certain stage of their life cycle. Artificially, the cells can be made to accept the foreign DNA by certain procedures, that is in vitro procedures. One of them is electroporation, whereby the high field strength results in the transient holes in the cellular envelope. As a result, through these holes, the naked DNA is being taken up into the cell. Normally, it has been observed that a high concentration of plasmids outside the cells can enter into the cells by this process of electroporation. And this is one of the methods which is also employed in rDNA technology. These kinds of transformations can occur in gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria both. Examples have been Streptococcus pneumoniae, Bacillus subtilis, as well as gram-negative organisms like Haemophilus influenzae, Neisseria gonorrhoeae. These are the diagrammatic representations how the naked DNA is being taken up into the cells. What is necessary is the intracellular ATP hydrolysis, the pH gradients PMF, and complement degradation. The functions of natural transformation, functions for natural transformations, they are nutritional, DNA repair, and genetic diversification. Now, the second process of gene transfer, that is conjugation, will be taken up by Piyush Bhai. Thank you. Thank you, Piyush Bhai.
Conjugation, as the name itself suggests, is a process where a physical contact between two participating cells is necessitated. Basically, the bacteria are probably the only microorganisms where three different types of genetic transfer methods are available. As already depicted by Professor Rakesh, the transformation is a process where gene transfer takes place, where the two cells don't necessarily have to physically combine. As you must have listened, one of the cells loses its cytoplasmic content out in the environment, and some fragments of the DNA material which already has spilled out of the cytoplasm has a chance of entering those viable cells which can act as recipients. So this is what happens in case of transformation. Transduction, one more method for gene transfer available to bacteria, once again will be discussed by Professor Rakesh, and he'll tell you how the donor cell is killed before its genetic material is accepted by the recipient cell. So these two methods, transformation as well as transduction, are the programs where genetic transfer does not at all need the physical contact between the two cells. In case of conjugation, however, which we are going to talk about in coming time, it becomes imperative that the two participating cells, the donor as well as the recipient, have to physically establish a contact, and unless this contact is established, the conjugation can never take place. So by the conventional practices, conjugation is also referred to as the true sexuality among the bacteria. The sexual reproduction in case of the bacteria is depicted by the program of conjugation. Two cells come close to each other. One of them will act as the donor, the other as recipient, which can also be called the donor and the male and the female respectively. As the slide suggests, the previous one please. This process was first of all discovered by Edward Tatum and his student Joshua Lederberg. Incidentally, Lederberg was only 22 when this event was discovered basically by Edward Tatum. Joshua Lederberg was his PhD student, and at the age of 22 he entered himself into the pages of history books by being a partner of inventing a novel mechanism for genetic transfer among bacteria. Here, once again, like in case of transformation and transduction, the role of the donor and the recipient is very well defined, as we will see in the coming times. The next slide, please. We may skip this slide because it depicts how the experimental evidence was generated. It may be conveniently done away with. Even this slide can be skipped. This is an important photograph to watch because it shows the two participating cells in conjugation where they are connected by a thread-like structure which is called the pilus. The bacteria, especially the gram-negative bacteria, develop some extracellular appendages which remain external to the cell wall, and these are two types of appendages. One are required for the locomotion, known as flagella. The others are called the pili or the fimbriae. Out of these pili, there is a single unit of pilus which is generated only by those bacterial cells which are going to act as the male or the donor bacterial cells. The male or the donor bacterial cells develop at the time of conjugation during a particular phase of their life cycle an additional thread-like structure called the sex pilus. This sex pilus is responsible for being connected to a recipient cell. Here you can see the donor bacterial cell is surrounded by a lot many pili, is comparatively thin and lengthier, and the pilus extended from the donor comes in contact of, on the right hand side, a female or the recipient bacterial cell, which incidentally is shorter in length and slightly thicker. So the pilus acts as a connecting thread, as a connecting bridge between the two cells, and is believed, though there are experimental proofs against this doctrine, but there are enough reasons to believe that the pilus is the medium, is the bridge across which, or rather through which, the genetic material passes from the male or the donor bacterial cell into the female or the recipient bacterial cell. The next slide will tell us how the sex pilus and its role in conjugation was established by scientist William Hayes. Apart from these, William Hayes is known for his contribution in finding out that the male bacterial cells, or those bacterial cells which can act as donors, contain within their cytoplasm an extra chromosomal piece of DNA, the extra chromosomal fragment of DNA, which is also called the plasmid. There are different varieties of the plasmids, incidentally, of which this is the one which decides the ability of a bacterial cell to act as the donor. Those bacterial cells which contain a particular variety of extra chromosomal DNA, the plasmid, of this variety, develop the capacity of being able to transfer the genetic material into the other variety of bacterial cells which are devoid of this particular piece of plasmid. The plasmid, therefore, is known as the sex factor or the fertility factor plasmid. In short, it is called the F factor plasmid or F plasmid. So those bacterial cells which contain this plasmid are called the F cells or F plus cells. That is the cells which contain the fertility factor, the sex plasmid, as a result of which they will be able to act as the donors. And naturally, the bacterial cells devoid of this plasmid are called F minus cells, and these cells act as the recipients of the female at the time of conjugation. The next slide tells us how conjugation can initiate by those cells which possess the sex factor plasmid. The sex factor plasmid, the extra chromosomal fragment of DNA, contains several genes which are collectively contributing to the overall program of genetic transfer from the male into the recipient. We will not go into the details of what exactly role of each and every gene is, but we have to understand that there is a specific gene which initiates the development of the sex pilus, and there are also genes which are called a TRA-operon, TRA-operon, which collectively help the transfer of genetic material from the donor into the recipient. As we move further, we will see a diagram where the transfer of genetic material is carried out. We have to basically understand that during the conjugation program, the genetic transfer is of two different varieties. Actually, the sex factor plasmid, the F factor, can exist in two different positions. Either it remains independent from the chromosomal DNA, where the cells are known to be the F plus cells. When this kind of cell, where the sex factor plasmid is independent, comes in contact of a recipient cell, what happens is that only the sex factor plasmid transfers from the donor into the recipient, as can be seen. The photograph at the top shows that the two cells have united. The second photograph coming down shows that the transfer is about to initiate, and the third photograph shows that the plasmid, which is incidentally a double-stranded DNA, has now started its own replication, where one of the strands remains within the donor cell and the other has started entering the recipient cell. If you look down, you notice that the plasmid has been replicated not only in the donor cell but also in the recipient cell, which has got the machinery to replicate the plasmid. And the last diagram at the bottom of the series shows us that the plasmid has been fully replicated into the recipient, in the recipient cell, and naturally in the donor cell as well. So now we can see there are two cells, the donor and the recipient, which we were knowing them as. Now both of the cells have got a copy of plasmid each. So the recipient, if you look carefully, has acquired a copy of plasmid. So at the beginning of the process of the conjugation, it was F minus cell, but now it has been converted into an F plus cell. It has, because it has acquired the copy of plasmid. So when an F plus cell mates, conjugates with F minus cell, what happens is that by end of the program, the copy of the plasmid transfers into recipient. The recipient becomes a F plus cell and thus acquires the capacity to act as a donor if it comes in contact of an appropriate recipient cell in the nearby vicinity. So this is what happens when the plasmid is independent. If the plasmid can exist in an alternative form, that is, it can integrate with the chromosomal DNA, then the whole situation becomes absolutely different. In case of the F plus into F minus cell, we have noted down that only the plasmid has transferred. The chromosomal genes did not at all transfer from the donor into the recipient. However, when the plasmid becomes integrated into the chromosomal DNA, what happens is that now the chromosomal genes are encouraged to move from the donor into the recipient. So here, the cells in which the plasmid is integrated with the chromosomal genes, the strains are called the HFR strains, that is the bacterial cells which have the tendency of transferring at a very high frequency their chromosomal genes, and naturally when this genetic transfer is going to result in the recombination, the cells are therefore called the HFR, for high frequency of recombination cells. When conjugation establishes between an HFR and an F minus type of cell, that is, the donor cell has the plasmid integrated into the recipient, and an F minus, that is a cell devoid of the sex factor plasmid, when these two combine, when these two conjugate, what happens is that the chromosomes start moving from the donor into the recipient. The overall mechanism remains the same, that is, when the DNA transfers from the donor into the recipient, only one of the strands is transferred into the recipient and it is replicated by the recipient as and when it enters the recipient cell. A problem here is that under natural conditions, the conjugational association between the two cells, between the donor and the recipient, is an extremely sensitive union. The two cells are connected, as I told you in the earlier time, by a thin thread called the sex pilus, and this bridge as established by the sex pilus is extraordinarily sensitive to the environmental disturbances, and in most cases, almost always, the conjugational bridge breaks down, the two mating cells are separated before the complete genetic material, chromosomal genes, are transferred from the donor into the recipient. Professor Rakesh told you that in case of bacteria, the genetic transfer almost always results in the development of a merozygote and incomplete zygote. In transformation, he told you that only a small fragment of the donor DNA enters the recipient. Here, even when there is a conventional probability that the two mating cells are united by a conjugational tube, and therefore there should be a probability that the complete DNA, complete chromosomal DNA, should transfer from the donor into the recipient. But because of the fragility of the conjugational tube, this doesn't become possible, and as a result, once again here, only a small fraction of the donor genetic material will be able to enter the recipient cell. The recipient therefore will form only a partial diploid, an incomplete diploid, and therefore is known as a merozygote. The next slide shows us a unique probability that the sex factor plasmid, the fertility factor plasmid, which integrates into the recipient, into the chromosomal DNA, can also dissociate, it can disintegrate from the chromosomal DNA, and in this process sometimes it may pick up a few chromosomal genes and may leave behind its own genes on the chromosomal DNA. When this situation arises, the resulting bacterial cell which has the sex spectral plasmid having picked up a few bacterial genes is known as an F' or F' cell. In case of the conjugation, if this kind of F' or F' cell initiates conjugation with an appropriate recipient, what happens is that the sex spectral plasmid only, because it is present in an independent position, that is going to be transferred from the donor into the recipient, but while it transfers into the recipient, it will also carry the few bacterial genes that it has picked up. So those bacterial genes are now transferred into the recipient. So this is a case of a mixed bag type of conjugation. If we look into the overall process, if the sex spectral plasmid is independent, there is no probability that conjugation genes will be transferred, only the plasmid transfers into the recipient. On the contrary, if the sex spectral plasmid is integrated with the chromosomal genes, what happens is that the chromosomal genes only going to be transferred. There is no probability that the sex spectral plasmid will be transferred. But this is a unique position where both the sex spectral plasmid as well as a few of the bacterial genes are transferred into the recipient cell. This phenomenon, which is not very regularly found in case of conjugation, is known as the sex duction or F' duction process. As I said, it is not happening very regularly among the conjugating partners, but sometimes it does happen. The conjugation under natural conditions is a process where the sexuality is possible among the bacteria and a good amount of variation in the gene pool of the bacterial cells is possible to form. But even to us human being, the research scientists, conjugation is a great help in preparation of the genetic map for the bacterial cells. The genetic map, what do we mean by a genetic map? It is an understanding of where exactly does a gene lie on the bacterial chromosome, and it also enables us to know the relative distance of a particular gene from the other genes. So when we know about each and every gene that is present on the bacterial cell, its respective position on the chromosome and its relative distance from the other genes, we can be said to have constructed a genetic map. Conjugation is a process where by a program known as interrupted mating experiment, this is possible. Though it is an extremely complicated and time-consuming process, in very brief we can understand that what is happening is that the bacterial cells are allowed to conjugate in an interrupted manner. That is, a whole bulk of donor and recipient cells is mixed together, and at regular time intervals a little fraction is withdrawn and the recipient cells are checked for how many and what kind of genes have transferred from the donor into them. So if we can do this regularly at a regular time interval, if the mating is interrupted, it is possible to trace the entry of genes into the recipient from the donor. Their respective position as well as their distance from the other genes can be measured, because we know the length of bacterial chromosome is almost 1 millimeter, as Professor Rakesh already told you. And if we know the rate of gene transfer, which is in most cases about 12 to 15 micron per minute, so if we know these two, if we know that the number of genes are these many, and if the rate of genetic transfer is also known, then we can construct a complete genetic map using the interrupted mating program. This figure shows you how one after another, if you look at the figure on the left, there is a set of figures, 5 figures, which shows you, this set of figures shows you that the genes are continuously transferred from the donor into the recipient, and as we move from up to down, the length of the DNA being transferred into the recipient increases. And on the right there is a graph depicting the entry of specific genes at specific times. So with this we can construct the genetic map, which is an effective method for gene mapping. Though there are many more methods for gene map construction, this is one very effective method. This once again tells us about which gene has entered into the recipient at what time. So the location and the orientation of the genes can easily be worked out by using the interrupted mating method. So this is one big advantage that the conjugation offers to the research scientists. The figure shows you, it appears like a dial of a clock, but it is basically the generic map of E. coli. This has been worked out using interrupted mating and many more, much more sensitive methods, and we are, the human beings are in a position to boast that we know the complete gene map of not only E. coli, not only lizard, but even the human beings. You must have heard of the Human Genome Project, which took about 12 years to complete, and it tells us that 25,000 genes are present on each chromosome of, in each cell of the human body. The Human Genome Project has its roots back into the interrupted mating method of conjugation. So that is how we can thank conjugational program for enriching our knowledge regarding the gene map construction and more development towards making more sophisticated methods for making and working out the same. I believe that is all we have to know at the moment about conjugation, and I once again hand back over to Professor Rakesh, where he'll tell you about the transduction process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piyush bhai. Now we come to the last process, that is transduction. Basically, as it has been introduced to you by Piyush bhai, the process does not necessarily requires, or it does not require at all, the physical contact of two cells. In transduction, it is the role of viruses, that is the bacteriophage, which comes into the play. If you see, you know already the basics of phage structure. It is having a head into which, that is the capsid, in which there is a DNA, and a tail through which the DNA passes out into the cell which is being attached to. For attachment, tail fibers are required, tail plates and tail panes are required, and when the cell is firmly adhered on the host cell, that is the virus, when it is adhered, bacteriophage is adhered on the host cells, then due to the contraction of the tail sheath, the DNA from the capsid, from the head, enters into the host cells. This is the general mechanism how the DNA of a phage enters into the host cell. Now, if you see the next slide, the transduction process can be classified into two categories. One is a generalized transduction and the other one is a specialized transduction. Both these transductions processes, they usually carry a little amount of DNA, that is approximately not more than 1% of the host chromosomes. And viral DNA, which is being transferred from one cell into the another, that is the host DNA, which is being picked up by the viruses and which is being transferred into the host chromosomes. There again the homozygous recombination takes place. As a result, the gene from one bacteria is introduced into the next bacteria which the phage is going to infect. Now, these kinds of processes are being carried out by again two different kinds of phages, that is, one is lytic phage and the other one is lysogenic phage. Lytic phages are the virulent phages. When they infect the cells, they multiply rapidly and they kill the cells, kill the host cells. They lyse the cells. While lysogenic phages, they infect the cells, but they undergo a condition which is known as a prophage condition, in which the nucleic acid of the virus integrates with the host chromosome and it multiplies into it. Now, basically, this process, that is known as a lysogenic process, is now a process whereby a prophage condition which is being formed, in which the cells continue to live, the host cells, they continue to live, and at certain point in their life cycle, the DNA will be removed from it and will continue the lytic cycle. Now let us consider the life cycle of phage lambda, which is a lysogenic phage. As you can see this in the diagram, the infection of the bacteriophage takes place wherein the phage has two choice. Rather, the cells have a two choice depending upon the competition between certain proteins which are formed by the phages and the certain proteins which are being formed by the host cells. It may undergo either a lytic cycle or a lysogeny. Whenever it is a lytic cycle, the cell takes the phage nucleic acid takes the control of the cell replicating machinery. It forms its own components, and finally when the assembly takes place, this is the point at which the generalized transduction takes place. Now usually what happens is that during the assembly process can be compared to the assembly of car lines, in which the automobile factory, you must have known that different components are formed at different places, and finally in an assembly line the chassis, wheels, the engine and everything is fitted according to a particular sequence. In phages also the same process takes place, that different components including the head proteins, sheath proteins, tail fibers, tail fins, everything is formed and they are assembled sequentially. Now the generalized transduction takes place whereby by mistake the head takes up the bacterial chromosome which has been disintegrated into several pieces. This disintegration has been done by the phage coded enzymes. The bacterial nucleic acid which has been disintegrated, and by mistake when during assembly a bacterial genes or a small portion of bacterial nucleic acid enters into the head portion, that is into the head capsid of the phages. At that time, this is by mistake, purely a mistake, that a phage head takes up the host nucleic acid which has been disintegrated into pieces. Then finally the assembly completes and the lysis takes place. Now out of so many viruses, one of the viruses is having a nucleic acid which is belonging to that of the host cell in which the virus infection had taken place. Now when these viruses have been released into the environment, and whenever a new host is being attacked, the same process takes place, that is the attachment, penetration, multiplication and lysis. Now when the new host is being attacked, during penetration the nucleic acid, which actually is a nucleic acid of the previous cell host, enters into this recipient cell, the cell which has been infected now, and that particular host cell will be deployed for a small piece of chromosomes. That is the merozygote, where a homologous recombination will take place, crossing over will take place. As a result, the host cell will acquire certain new characteristics, new genotype will be formed. So this is a generalized transduction. Why we call it as a generalized transduction? Because any fragment, any gene, it is not necessary that a one particular set of genes will be packed up by the capsid, that is the head. Any small fragment, It is a random process and any small fragment can enter into the capsid during the process of assembly. And therefore, it is known as a generalized process of transduction. Now coming to a specialized transduction. In this specialized transduction, it is usually taking place in the lysogenic conditions. In the prophase stage, that is when the phage nucleic acid, which is not a virulent, that is a lysogenic phage, when it enters into the cells, at times, rather than carrying out a lytic cycle, it integrates with the host chromosome. Now, where does it integrate? There are certain sites at which the integration takes place. And when it integrates into the host chromosome considers these genes as their own and successively replicates. And when it replicates, all progeny cells will have the virus chromosome or the virus nucleic acid with it. Normally, at certain stage, this virus nucleic acid disintegrates from the host cells, and in most of the cases, most of the times, this disintegration is very accurate, and whatever the portion of phage nucleic acid has been integrated, exactly the same portion comes out. But in few instances, rather than taking up or rather than a perfect disintegration, it leaves certain portion of its own DNA into the host chromosome and picks up the nearby lying genes of the host and comes out. This can be compared something similar to formation of a F prime as we have seen it in a conjugation. So when the viral nucleic acid picks up the adjoining genes either on the left side or the right side, then what happens is a small piece of DNA comes out successfully, and that DNA is now there as a part of the host nucleic acid. When it multiplies, again number of DNA copies are formed, and then they are picked up or packed up into the capsid of the viruses. And when these viruses, when it attacks when it undergoes a new replicative cycle, when it finds a new host, then that piece forms a merozygote. That genes enter into the host cells. As a result, a diploid for that particular gene will be formed. It undergoes a crossing over, recombination, and acquires a new genotype. So this is how the process of specialized transduction takes place. So friends, we have discussed here the process of specialized and generalized transduction in detail. As a result, no cell-to-cell contact is necessary. Only the viruses are able to transfer certain fragments of the host chromosomes into the newly attacked host cells. This figure indicates or it shows the process of transduction, that is the generalized transduction, in detail. Thank you very much, friends.
Thank you very much. Thank you.